Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and we're producing this episode for Forbes.com, where I am a contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. Our guest today is Joe Whitworth, the president of the Freshwater Trust. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Great to be here, Devin. Thanks for having me.
Joe, you're doing some really, they seem to me to be very new, very novel things in terms of trying to finance conservation, and we're excited to learn more about them. But give us just, if you can, a quick overview of Freshwater Trust so we can put your activities in the broader context.
Well, the Freshwater Trust began in the 1980s as very much a traditional conservation group. We listed several of the first Pacific salmon under the Endangered Species Act, and we really engaged in advocacy as we all have come to know what the modern environmental movement really does look like. Sometime in the early 2000s, not long after I came on board, we really assessed what we were really getting, what kind of progress we were really making, and our assessment was that we needed to speed things up. And we started to move into utilizing markets around water transactions. We purchased excess irrigation water from landowners and put it in stream for the benefit of the stream. And over time, over the last decade really, we have begun to focus in more and more on utilizing tools like technology, software to sort through a mishmash of actors to get more work done more speedily, and we're starting to engage impact investors to get the scale that we need on a timeline that matters.
Well, it sounds like exciting work. As you look at the new arena you're operating in with the conservation finance, who are the investors that are stepping up to help fund the work that you're doing?
Well, in the first instance, it's really been a lot of private foundations that are really moving out of kind of the grant world that we have known for so long, and sort of the strictly philanthropic world that we've lived in, to one where we're starting to utilize essentially low interest unsecured loans to finance projects that render environmental good in a quantified way to meet compliance and get environmental outcomes that we need to get. And so some of our partners are the Packard Foundation, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, and there are several others that are stepping into this space with some clear aggressiveness in wanting to get this part of the world moving in the direction that it needs to go.
Are these investments typically being made as program-related investments in the foundation world, or do you know?
Exactly. See, Devin, you know more about this than you let on. Program-related investment is one of the easiest models for foundations to get into this space, and it still is categorized as part of their granting need, their giveaway need of 5% on six trailing quarter averages, and so that's the easiest first step that we've seen. Once we start to see more deals proliferate and a greater standardization of those deals, then we might move into, on the other side of the corporate line and really become a mission-related investment. And that's kind of when these, small R&D efforts incubate into something that looks like it's replicable and scalable. And so that is in the future. Right now, I think everybody engaged in this space is really looking for, how do we make all these deals investable in a more standardized way? And there's a lot of translating that's going on between, the social entrepreneurs that, like our organization, the impact investors that are themselves trying to bridge the old foundation ways of doing business, and now you have folks like Goldman and J.P. Morgan Chase starting to take a hard look at, maybe this is going to get real soon enough, and we better start lining up on it. So as far as I can tell, there seems to be just sort of an increasing dialogue with a bunch of non-conforming vocabularies that are starting to coalesce around getting things done.
So, Joe, as you look at some of these projects, can you give us some specific examples? I'm sure you can, but if you could, we'd really appreciate it, just to get a sense of the projects that are being funded and how the returns are being derived, the financial returns. And then, of course, let's talk about the environmental impacts.
Right. So our classic example, really the first deal that we did, was on a tributary that's a few hundred miles south of me on the Rogue River. There was a small town there, 90,000, 100,000 people that has to deal with their wastewater. And everything that goes down a pipe has to be treated. When that water is treated, it is oftentimes heated up, and so they return the water to the waterway clean but warm. And this is permitted under the Clean Water Act and required under the Clean Water Act, has been for decades now. And really the only option available to the municipalities that manage that utility is to build a big gray cooling tower. And that's a big capital expense. It has really significant ongoing O&M, and you have to make a financial choice if you're the city manager or the city council down there. And what they need to do is be in compliance with the Clean Water Act in order to operate, and they really need to understand how that impacts their finances and their rate payment to pay for that.
They're required to cool the water before they put it back into the river under the Clean Water Act, or not?
Exactly.
Okay.
And because you can't have temperature is considered a pollutant under the Clean Water Act, right? And essentially, the Clean Water Act requires that all waters of the United States are fishable, swimmable, and drinkable. And in our case, we live in salmon country, and so those fish require a certain type of water temperature and water quality. And if you compare that with something like a thermal plume, hot water going out into a waterway, you're out of compliance. And so, as I noted, their only option for the city managers is just to build a big chilling tower with its expenses and also a carbon footprint that is not the greatest thing, as we're beginning to learn as a society. But they had no other option. But a few years ago, we figured out that if you do specific restoration, you can generate a specific unit that is quantified, and in this case it's a kilocalorie, it's a unit of temperature, and that created the lingua franca between the economy and the environment so that we could do a transaction together. And as it worked out, in our instance with the city of Medford, they were going to spend something on the order of $20 million to do their cooling facility, and instead they're going to spend $6 to $7 million with us doing upstream restoration to really shield the waterway from the sun. Solar impacts are the #1 reason waterways and watersheds heat up. So what they were able to do was get a very easy compliance option that saved them money. And interestingly, they were able to put people to work locally, sourcing the plant material that we needed, doing the actual work that needs doing. We were able to compensate landowners for growing bushels of nature, if you will, which makes their land, which provides a new way to look at their land as an asset, not just as a productive asset for a commodity crop, but also for what it's doing for the environment. And as a practical matter, we were able to, a tree does a lot more than just provide shade. It stabilizes the bank so you don't have the runoff of sediment. It uptakes nutrients, so again, you don't have runoff that's a negative influence on the water. It sequesters carbon, it provides habitat. So as a matter of the environment, it's a winner going away. And in terms of what we did in saving the municipality a lot of dollars, it's kind of a rare opportunity where you can get it all right. And that's something we're looking to replicate not just here in this region, but around the country.
It seems like a great model. So who are your investors on that particular project?
Well, in that instance, we have the way that it operates is, we have a contract with the city, and so we go out and we have a contract to perform. They don't pay until we provide them certified, registered units of uplift, and it's very transparent. And essentially, we go out, source the project sites. So we go in and we develop software that can go into a basin and find where the highest uplift sites are within a basin. And what we do is we then go and contact those landowners and say, hey, would you be interested in doing a project? They say, sure. We clear the site, we prep the site, we plant the site, we get it third-party certified, and it's registered on the registry. And at that moment, those credits can be purchased. And so the flash to boom on these projects can be, if you take out the landowner recruitment piece, which can take a few months, really the site prep and the finished prep is 7 months. So it's can be done very quickly. And our financial partners in this deal are a suite of foundations as well as our commercial bank. And in that case, it's working really well. As we begin to scale up, we're starting to look at, how do we build the right financing stack to scale this out? Our first inclination is probably go with, the social impact investors that have come with us this far. But we do want to expand the audience, and so that we can. At some point, this is going to grow well beyond our organization if things go right.
Yeah. So this is really an innovation that you've created. What do you see? Following up on your thought here, are you beginning to see others look at this, try it? What is the stage of development for this whole concept of conservation finance?
Well, I think it's important not to mistake a clear vision for a short trip. We are very much on the beginning end of this, and that's okay. What we have is we're moving into a really interesting intersection between conservation and traditional environmentalism, which has its own set of cultural wars, and financial institutions, and as I noted, the foundations. We also have the added bonus of having regulators involved as well as landowners. So we find ourselves moving through this intersection, honestly, for the first time. And a big part of what we're doing is translating among all these folks, not just sort of the dollars and cents of it, not just the biological metrics and the environmental uplift, but there's a lot of culture here. And what we find ourselves doing more often than anything else is just making sense of this. And to a degree, we are just doing the same thing that conservation groups have always done, which is put work on the ground. And the novel piece here is who's buying, what's their motivation, who gets paid, when do they pay. And right now, I think it's really important where we're at to not characterize what we're doing as, we don't have a market now. Right now, we have a series of contracts upon which we must perform. At some point future, if we can standardize the legal, transactional, and biological mechanics of this so that, if the first project looks like the 5th project and the 5,000th project, that's when we know we will have succeeded. But right now, we're kind of playing the game. We're going head down. If a piece in the transaction is missing, we're like, heck, let's build it. And so that's what we're doing. We find ourselves doing a lot of the pieces here that ultimately, once this matures and becomes a demonstrably better way of getting work done, then we will have folks come along, and we'll love to hand a lot of those pieces off.
Well, it is an amazing process that you've really gotten started here, and we're excited to keep learning more. How did you come? How did you get started on this thing? What was the trigger point for figuring out that there might be a way to do this?
Well, there have been several over the course of my life, but the one that really makes sense to this one is we were just working with a single landowner, um, which we had done hundreds of times before. And it was a guy that wanted to fix a single mile of stream. And it took us 3 years in permitting and funding cycles to get the chance to do 1 week of work and 1 mile of work. And that was moving pretty good through the system as currently designed. And that was when you step back and look at the number of miles we have in the United States, which is, we have more than, 55% of our, 5-6 million stream miles in the United States fail to support aquatic life that needs some kind of regress. And we're moving at a rate of 1 mile every 3 years. I mean, and even if you multiply that by all of the conservation groups in America doing work today, it really just doesn't matter. And we have to, the first thing we had to do is realize that. And it was very jarring when we did the social math about how many miles we're moving and how much we're not getting done. That's when we said, okay, the real question we need to be asking ourselves is, if we landed on Earth today and we were in charge, what would we build to make this problem find a solution? And we wrestled with that one quite a bit. But once we could put a face on it, one of the great values of being in an NGO is you have not only the license, but I believe the responsibility to answer that question with vigor, no matter what it takes. And so that's what led us to, it led us into software patenting, it led us into quantification of environmental uplift, it's now led us into markets, and now the technology and satellites, and we're getting into some really great areas. And the truth is, our sector, the environmental sector, like the same is also true of the governmental sector, in so many ways enterprise technology has not penetrated our work, and we really have to bring tools that are now available into our work so that we can address the issues that are of this century with the tools that are also of this century, not the last.
How big is the problem? You talked about it in terms of miles, but I think you have some metrics for assigning some dollar values to the annual requirement or the global requirement for stream restoration. How do you think about that in terms of dollars?
Well, right now I try not to dwell on that number, but I think it's very safe to say that we are applying a billions of dollars effort to a trillions of dollars question. And, what we're really focused on is not so much spending more money, because I think that's not what we need to do. We need to spend money more with greater precision. And I'll give you a very easy example. We have, for the first time now, the ability to look at a watershed that can be hundreds of miles square. We can look at that watershed 1 or 2 inches off the ground, and we can tell precisely what the land condition is in. And from that, we can model what is the functionality of these systems and the potential uplift. So what we know is if you plant a tree on the north bank of a river, you're not going to get a whole lot of shade benefit, just given the aspect of the sun and the movement of the sun. If you plant it on the south side, you're going to get a lot more. But the way that money is distributed through governmental agencies, foundations, and even conservation dollars and donor dollars, anybody that raises their hand and wants to do a project, we say, okay, let's do it. That's been our history. It's sort of a spray and pray. Hope that the dollars you send out into the world really do matter. But the fact is, only until very recently, we were not able to really X-ray and quantify the value that we're getting. So the phenomena that you have is we can spend $50,000 on the North Bank and get 5 units of good, 5 units of uplift out of it. Or we can spend $50,000 on the South Bank and get 5,000 units of good. And for the first time, we can see that on the front end. And so what that allows us to do is effectively get more environmental uplift for each single dollar that we spend. So the governmental dollars that we have, I mean, we spend upwards of $10 billion in this country every year on freshwater health and restoration. And the fact is, we don't really know what we're getting. And it's important to note that that doesn't sort of impugn everybody and say, everybody that's been doing this work has been doing a bad job and they're dumb and all that. That's not what we're talking about. We just now, for the first time, have the ability to see these things, and it's incumbent on us to use that. So we can get, instead of spending $10 billion and getting maybe $4 billion worth of good out of it, we can now spend 10 and get much closer to that 10. And that's what we have to do across the board.
Fantastic. Well, Joe, tell us how people can get in touch with you, and tell us how people can help you advance the work you're doing.
Well, I think, of course, the freshwatertrust.org, check it out. We've got some interesting graphics. I will say that what we do have on our website is, as best as we can keep up with, we're driving into white space pretty dramatically right now. But I think get online, Google the words conservation finance, Google the words ecosystem services. Start beginning to understand what it means to bring these two big pieces together. Another thing, a little closer to home, is read your water bill. Look at how much you're paying per gallon of water. I don't care where you're at. You're spending a lot more than some sectors of the world are spending, and you might want to understand that. So, I believe that all learning begins with a question. So I'll not give you the answer. I'll just give you the questions for now.
Very good. Well, Joe, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. We know you're very busy, and thank you for taking the time. We certainly also wish you success in the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Devin. Hopefully we'll make it worth your while.
All righty. Let's do some good.